So I think I told you all I'm pretty, family's pretty important to me. So last time I was home, I had to go see Grandma, right? Because, you know, family's important to me. Grandma's pretty old. She's in her 90s now. She lives in assisted living care. I don't know if you know what that is, right? So it's not quite nursing home. She has her own little mini apartment, but they're there to help her, and she eats in the common dining room, that kind of thing. So I sit and talking to Grandma, and I was there for quite a bit, and I was starting to get hungry, and she had a bowl of peanuts on the table, and I reached down, I grabbed a peanut, and popped it in my mouth, and I instantly knew these were Grandma peanuts, right? Grandma's got high blood pressure, so there was no salt on the peanuts. The little bit of humidity in Seattle, so they're a little bit sticky. You know Grandma's hard candy dish where you have to chip the candy out is kind of like that, and they're just a touch stale. But over the next hour or so, I ate the entire bowl of peanuts. I ate the whole bowl of peanuts. So I was going to leave, and I was giving Grandma a hug goodbye, and I'm like, Grandma, I'm so sorry. I ate all your peanuts. She said, Joe, don't worry about it. I said, no, Grandma, I'll come by tomorrow with more peanuts. She said, Joe, don't worry about it. I go, Grandma, let me replace your peanuts. She said, Joe, you don't understand. Since they took my teeth, all I do is suck the chocolate off of them. The decisions we make are based on the perceptions of the world around us. Just a little bit more information. And maybe I'd still eat peanut M&Ms today. I don't know, right? Now I don't, right? The decisions we make are based on the world around us, okay? So we're going to take a look at how those decisions are made. What's going on in our brains, right? Remember I told you they're not brains. They're aliens that are doing their own thing. We're going to walk through that, okay? So let's start with some basic psychology. This is a portrait of my wife. Okay. But, you know, you may all know somebody that you work with that's like this, right? And why don't they throat punch, right? Because people will do what they perceive is in their best interest to do. This is psychological axiom number one that I want you to remember. Powerful juju, powerful psychology here, right? People will do what they perceive is in their best interest to do. Organizations will do what the organization perceives in its best interest to do, right? When Russia started acting up down in the Ukraine and Crimea, Dr. Kissinger, Henry Kissinger, was on one of the talk shows, and they asked Dr. Kissinger, can we trust Russia? And his response is, we could trust Russia to do what Russia perceives is in its best interest to do, okay? So this is axiom number one. People will do what they perceive is in their best interest to do. Perceive is the key word, and we're going to explain why. Axiom number two is this idea of in-group psychology. In-group psychology, right? And first part of in-group psychology says people want to be part of something bigger than themselves. Why did you join the Air Force? I'll tell you why I joined the Air Force, to be part of something bigger than myself, national defense, right? No, I wanted to fly, and they're going to give me a pilot's license for free, right? That's why I joined the Air Force. But at some point, I changed. At some point, I decided I wanted to be part of something bigger than myself. Otherwise, when I was no longer flying, I wouldn't have stayed in, right? I wouldn't have stayed in. At what point in your career did you stop being in the Air Force and the Air Force started being in you? What point did you stop being in the Air Force and the Air Force started being in you? Everybody wants to be part of something bigger than themselves, right? In fact, to the point where we'll begin to build our identity around that thing. Whatever that thing is that is bigger than myself, I'll begin to build my identity and my belonging around it, right? To the point where I'll choose to modify my own behavior, right? I'll keep my hair cut short. I'll wear the same clothes to work every day, right? I won't do spice. I live in Colorado. I won't have the cool brownies, right? Okay, because I will modify my own behavior to be part of something bigger than myself. And I choose to do that. And that choice then is based on a perception of what? What's in my best interest, okay? Normally on commitment, loyalty, and trust offered back to the group, okay? So let me give you an example of how this works. There's a guy that teaches this course for me. He's a guy named Rich, and Rich is, he's an IMA colonel, okay, Rich Tatum, and Rich's son finished high school, great grades. His report card said, on the bottom of his report card said, this is a student, we wish all our students were like him. This is a guy that's going to be a great member of our society. In fact, smart enough and good enough grades, he gets into Pepperdine University in Malibu, California, right? What a tough place to go to school, right? Goes out to Malibu. 18 years, Rich and his wife have raised their son. And he goes out to Malibu. He's a success. Things have gone great, right? First 6 months, he's doing well at Pepperdine, and then he finds an in-group that he kind of likes, an in-group that he wants to become part of, bigger than himself, right? And he begins to look and build his identity around this in-group to the point where he will choose to modify his behavior to join this something bigger than himself. This in-group happens to be the party in-group out of Pepperdine, right? And the center of this in-group is a group of very rich foreign kids that live on the beach, in a house on the beach in Malibu. And when they throw parties, they have security at the party. And I'm not talking about Bubba on his motorcycle. I'm talking about the guys in the black suit with the wired earpieces. This is the security they have at the party. Well, he doesn't have the money to do this. And he starts hanging out at these parties. And he enjoys the parties, he enjoys the drugs, and he can't afford it, so he starts selling drugs. And pretty soon they find out that he's part of a criminal conspiracy, where if you go through him and you order a purse, the purse comes, you slice the liner of the purse open, and there's your fake ID, right? And I'm talking really good quality fake IDs. They can't tell the difference on, right? And so now this guy's part of a criminal conspiracy doing drugs. 18 years they raised him, 18 months. Not this last November, but about 14 months ago, he commits suicide. They find him hanging in his room, dead. 18 months it took to break 18 years of raising. That's how powerful this is. He wanted to be part of something bigger than himself. He built his identity around it. He modified his own behavior. And when it fell apart, his perception was, if I can't be committed, loyalty, and trust to that group, then the best solution is to end it. This is why people join gangs, right? Like inner city join gangs, they come out and they see something that's bigger than themselves, and they go, I want to be part of that. They love and take care of each other. And so they join gangs, and they'll modify their own behavior to the point where they'll go out and commit crimes and atrocities that they would never commit on their own, all to be part of something bigger than themselves. These are negative examples, but this works in the positive too. Your airmen want to be part of something bigger than themselves. They will, if you build their identity around that, if this something is being an airman, they'll build their identity around it, and they'll choose to modify their own behavior. And then what that behavior looks like is based on the perception of commitment, loyalty, and trust, right? And here's the key, and this is why I put this up there, is we have the ability to influence that perception. And who influences them? Our leadership. This is why we're in the room today, right? But if there's an in-group, there's a what? Out-group, right? If there's an hey, Dick, can you close the door for me? If there's an in-group, there's an out-group, okay? And what does our out-group look like in our Air Force? So if your airmen have come in, they bleed blue, right? They sent the bumper stickers home, says proud Air Force parent, and then they've decided they don't want to be part of the Air Force, but they're still in, so they're not in our in-group anymore. What does that out-group look like? Is that the folks smoking spice in the dorms on Friday night? Is that our underage drinkers? Is that our folks that are sexually assaulting people? They're no longer representing our core values, right? And so they're an out-group. Well, we can begin to shape that. So we got to understand then, if we keep in mind that people will do what they perceive is in their best interest to do, and people want to be part of something bigger than themselves, if we keep those two in mind and we join them up, we can begin to change how we lead people, right? So step number one is to understand that behavior starts with the decision, right? Any action I take with my hands, any behavior I take starts where? Here. In my brain, right? It starts with a decision to do it. I don't go out blindly. Well, okay, maybe your teens go out and blindly do actions, right? But the rest of us, it starts with a decision, right? And that decision is based on our perception of what? What's in our best interest to do, right? That perception is continually being shaped, and it can be shaped by others. This is how this works. Here's how the chain works. If I want to stop an action, I want to stop airmen from doing drugs, I'm going to stop focusing on the action, and I'm going to start focusing on the decision they make, and I'm going to begin instead to take actions that change their perception so they make the decision I want, so they choose the actions I want instead of me dictating the actions, right? If you want to affect behavior, you got to influence perceptions. But to do that, you got to have relationships based on trust. Let me give you an analogy of this how this works, right? Anybody? It's Vegas, so I don't know if anyone here has grass. Does anyone here have grass? A little patch in the backyard for the dog to do his business on, right? Okay, but if I got a gorgeous lawn, let's say I have a gorgeous lawn, right? It's the lawn that PGA stops by during the week. They want to practice on. It's that beautiful, right? And I'm sitting out there one day on my back porch, and I see this weed pop up in the middle of my lawn. Boop. Right? So this weed has popped up in the middle of my gorgeous lawn. If I treat the weed the way the Air Force treats the weed, what do? I go in the garage, and I reach up on the shelf, and I grab what? The Roundup, right? And I go out into the lawn, and I go, weed, you're not welcome in my lawn, and I start doing what? Squirting it with the Roundup, right? Sexual offenders, you're not welcome in the Air Force. Do I kill the weed? What else do I kill? The grass around it, don't I? But as the Air Force, we do this, right? BMT is a problem, we'll fix BMT. And we kill the weed, but we completely kill off the grass around it. And just as we step back and we thump our chest and we go, we are the Air Force, we are mighty, we are righteous. They're cheating in the missile field, right? And we start squirting Roundup over there. There's another, ROTC's got an issue. They're singing wrong songs. They're sexually assaulting. They're sexually harassing. When we step back, what's our grass look like now? It's a bunch of brown spots, right? Are the weeds dead? Sure. Do we kill weeds? You bet. We'll go get after some weeds, won't we? But we kill the grass around it, and we kill airmen off around it. Why? Because we're focused on the action, not on the perception. In fact, what's a better way for me to raise my lawn? Instead of weeding it, I should be doing what? Feeding it, right? Growing the grass stronger, because the grass will come in, and the grass will choke out the weeds, won't they? Now, let's be realistic. We're the Air Force. Can we allow drug users and criminals and rapists and cheats and thieves inside of our midst? No. We have to reach down and pluck those weeds out, don't we? So we got to weed and feed. We got to grow stronger grass. We do that by stop focusing on the behavior, stop focusing on the weed, and start focusing on the grass in the environment, and begin to change the perception in the environment. Begin to change our airmen's perception. It will change their decisions. It will change their actions. This works the same at home, folks. You want to change your teens' actions on Friday night? Don't yell at them about drinking underage. Change the perception of what that means to them so that they choose. Now when they go out, whose choice is it not to drink underage? It's their choice, right? And it's powerful and it's strong, and they'll stick by it. If it's simply because they're afraid Dad's going to squish them like a bug when they get home, no problem. I'll just come home after Dad goes to bed, right? Focusing on the action versus the decision, okay? But to do that, I got to have a relationship of trust. How well does that work with your teen if your teen doesn't trust you? What's your marriage look like if your spouse doesn't trust you? Can you begin to grow an environment of commitment and loyalty if you have no trust? No. Trust goes, loyalty goes. Once loyalty goes, commitment goes. Pretty soon you walk. Apply this to your airmen. Do your airmen trust you? Are they committed? Are you committed to the same things? Okay? If you want to begin to change behavior, stop focusing on behavior and focus on changing the perception so they make the decision so that it's their decision and they own it, okay? I got an example, I'll show you this. Here's how this works. Here's why this works. What you got to understand is everyone has a brain. Now, who had those teenagers? Raise your hands again. You might disagree with statement number one, right? Your teens don't have a brain. No, everyone has a brain. And everyone has their own experiences. I know this to be a fact because if everyone didn't have their own experiences, if everyone's experiences were the same, then everybody in this room would have a Seattle Seahawks wallet in their pocket, right? You'd all be Seahawks fans, right? That's not the case. In fact, I quite often get booed anymore when I tell people I'm a Seahawks fan, right? You all have your own experience, and that experience becomes your perspective on life. Okay? And which shapes your way of thinking. You got to understand that. If you expect your airmen, if you expect your teens to share your way of thinking, you're going to miss the boat. And you're not going to be able to influence the perception of what's in their best interest, right? We were having a discussion about the differences in millennials. If you think that they share the same experiences as you, you're wrong. Okay? That perspective then is shaped over a lifetime. And what we do is we push our airmen to get at the action instead of dropping breadcrumbs and leading them through organic leadership to self-discovery so that they choose the unique way of thinking and they choose to be part of our in-group and they choose to modify their behavior. Okay? Here's how this works. Let me give you a story about my boss, Dr. Jeff Smith. Okay? So Jeff was 5th grade. No kidding, this is a 100% true story. Jeff was 5th grade and he was at school and the teacher said, all right, class, I know it's hard, but it's time for math. Everybody get your math books out. Now, what's the first thing she already did? She primed them to believe what? That it's hard, okay? So they all get their math books out, and she goes up to the board. She gets out the chalk. Who remembers chalk? Okay. She gets out the chalk, and she draws a big circle on the board. And she says, we're going to talk about circles. This is a circle. The distance across the circle is called the diameter, and she writes D. She measures it with a yardstick. And half the diameter is called the radius. Pretty simple math, right? And the difference around the circle is called the circumference. And circumference is equal to 2 times the radius times this thing called pi. She goes, now pi is 3.14. When Jeff's hand goes up, she goes, yes, Smitty. He goes, where'd pi come from? What is pi? She goes, pi is 3.14. He goes, yeah, I know you said that, but she goes, no, don't worry about it. All you need to know is pi is 3.14. So when you see pi, just put in 3.14. Okay, let's move on. So walking home that day, Jeff's little 10-year-old 5th grade mind is wrestling with this. He can't understand it. If pi is just 3.14, then why don't we just write 3.14? And where's the E in pi? And why does it have its own symbol? He just can't get this, right? So he goes home. And Jeff, if anyone knows Jeff, he's just a touch of a geek, right? He goes, gets butcher block paper, sits down at his kitchen table, starts drawing circles, and he has a ruler out and he's measuring. And his dad walks in and goes, son, what are you doing? He says, well, Dad, we're doing circles, and we talked about this thing called pi today, and I don't get it. I don't understand what it is. Now, did his dad understand pi? His dad does. That'll come out in the story. And his dad could have simply told him what pi was. Instead, he looks at what he's doing. He looks at his son, and he goes, why don't you go get some string? And he walks out. And Jeff goes, huh, okay. I have no idea why Dad wants to get string, but I'll get string. He brings string and just mess around with string in these circles for about 20 minutes. And at 20 minutes, about the 20-minute point, Jeff has this revelation. He realizes if he stretches the string across the diameter of the circle, it'll wrap around the circle once, twice, 3 times with a little bit left over, 0.1415 left over. And he goes, aha, pi is simply the circumference divided by the diameter. And it's constant for all size circles because he tries this with different size circles. Sitting at his table in Idaho, Jeff discovers pi just like the mathematician did thousands of years prior, right? He fell in love that day. Does anyone know what Jeff Smith fell in love with that day? Math. He'd go on to get his math degree in college, right? Because his dad didn't just go, son, pi is just the circumference divided by the diameter. It's constant for all size circles. It's 3.14. He would have explained it to him. Instead, his dad drops breadcrumbs. He knows his son, and he knows how to shape him, and he says, why don't you get string? What about you? Do you give your airmen string, or do you just push them? The story doesn't stop there, so Jeff goes back to school the next day, right? And the teacher, about 2 in the afternoon, says, all right, class, I know it's hard, but it's time for math. Get your math books out. And she goes back to the chalkboard, and she draws the big circle. Yesterday, we talked about the circumference. Today, we're going to talk about the area. The area is pi r squared. Who remembers what pi is? And Jeff raises his hand. She goes, Smitty, what's pi? Now, what's she expecting to hear? 3.14. Instead, Smitty goes, pi is the ratio of the circumference divided by the diameter. It's constant for all size circles, and it's equal to 3.14. And she says, I'm sorry? And he said, would you like me to come up and explain? And she says, please. She steps off to the side. So Jeff comes up, he digs in his pocket, comes out with a length of string. He says, if we take the diameter across the circle, it'll go around the circle once, twice, 3 times with a little bit left over. How much? 0.1415 left over. Pi is simply a relationship between the circumference divided by the diameter. It's constant for all size circles, and it's equal to 3.14. And he turns and looks at his teacher, and here's his teacher. And she said, Jeff, I never knew where pi came from till right now. Today. Now raise your hand in your room if you didn't, in this room if you didn't know where pi came from. It's okay. It's usually about 25% of the audience. This audience might be a little lower. A lot of math happened in this audience, right? Didn't know where pi came from. Jeff fell in love with something else that day. What did he fall in love with that day? Teaching. He would get his degree, his math degree in teaching. He'd teach high school math before he joined the Air Force. He'd teach math at the Air Force Academy when he taught there. He taught at Air War College, taught at SAS. He's still teaching today. His dad shaped his entire life because he dropped breadcrumbs and said, why don't you go get some string? Instead of simply telling him. He chose to shape his perception instead of simply telling him. Do you shape your airman's perception? Do you give them string? Or do you just simply tell them because it's faster, it's easier, it's quicker? It's not as powerful because they don't choose it for themselves, okay? So we got to understand then, if we're going to do that, if we're going to shape people's way of thinking, we're going to shape their perception so that we get them to make the decisions we want them to make, so we get the behavior we want, we got to understand how this thing in our brain works, okay? It ain't a brain. I told you that. It's an alien, and it's doing things on its own, but we got to understand how it works. And so we're going to start with this guy named Simon Pierre Laplace in the 1700s. Anybody remember who Laplace is? Yes, it's another mathematician, right? Of course, my boss who wrote this courseware is a math guy, wrote about a mathematician, right? Okay, but Laplace was also a philosopher. And Laplace, first of all, believed in a philosophy called determinism. Okay, we're not going to go into the entire philosophy of determinism. It's not what the course is about. But it's the idea that certain things are determined. Certain things will happen. They are a fact. They can't be changed. The sun will rise in the north and set in the south, right? No, it's a fact. It'll rise in the east. It'll set in the west. It's a fact. This is how we knew that there would be a lunar eclipse a few months back, right? Anybody get a chance to see that? I understand out west, out here in Arizona, it was gorgeous. We knew that was coming, didn't it? Because it was determined. There are things that are a fact that we know for a fact, okay? And there can't be two separate facts on the same topic, right? Either it was going to be a lunar eclipse or there wasn't. Couldn't be an in-between. And Laplace knew this, and he knew certain things were determined. It was deterministic, okay? But he also knew that life was full of uncertainty, that not everything in the world could be determined, right? This is why we could take a patient that is suffering from some sort of disease or some sort of problem. We give them a pill, and they get cured. Another patient with the same exact disease, same exact problem, we give them the same pill, and they die. Right? Because not everything is deterministic. Some things are just uncertain, okay? Well, Laplace had a friend, and he came to Laplace and he said, Simon, I'm losing everything throwing the dice, right? That never happens here in Vegas, right? Any craps players in the room? No? Okay, I'll hold craps class after this, right? Awesome game. So he said, Simon, I'm losing a lot of money throwing the dice. I need your help. You're a smart guy. You know this determinism thing. How can I know what number is going to come out on the dice? Well, Laplace said, well, let's take what we know for a fact. We know for a fact that we'll get a certain combination on the dice, right? If I have 2 dice, can I throw a 1? No. Can I throw a 13? No, so we know for a fact that it'll be somewhere between a 2 and a 12, right? But do I know what it will be? No. But I can begin to look at how likely certain numbers will come up. This is Laplace came up with this, right? He said, I know for a fact a 2 only comes up how many ways? 1 way, right? A 3 comes up how many ways? 2 ways, a 1 and a 2 or a 2 and a 1. And onward we go till we get to what number has the most possible combinations on the dice? 7, which is why around here, if you throw a 7, you typically lose, right? And then it starts going back down until we get to 12. How many possible combinations of 12 on the dice? 1. And he said, so I know when you let go of the dice, what number is most likely to come up, the highest probability. They ought to put up a statue of Laplace down on the strip. Laplace is the father of probability. This entire town is built on probability, right? So why? Why do I talk about this? Because our brain works the same way, okay? Inside your brain, you have green blocks that are your perception of the world, your perspective of the world, your experiences on the world. They sit up here. This is how I interpret the world, how I see the world, okay? And here's the really cool thing, is that your brain can't really distinguish. Once a green block is inside, it can't distinguish whether you experienced it or whether you learned it. It really doesn't care. Once it's accepted, the green block is something that's deterministic, a fact, a known fact to you, it just accepts it, right? And here, I'll prove this to you. Anybody ever lay their hand on top of a red hot stove and leave it there till they didn't have fingerprints anymore? Maybe you're gonna go commit a crime that day. Anybody ever do that? Why? It hurts. How do you know it hurts? You've never done it. How do you know it hurts? Because you've probably done what? You probably accidentally touched, or you reached for the stove when you were 3, and what happened? Mom took that wooden spoon and went swick, right? That hurts, and you were taught it hurts. It's a green block. Does anyone in this room have any doubt if you laid your hand on top of the hot stove, it would hurt? No, you all share that green block. It is a green block set in your head. It is a fact. It is known, okay? But guess what? You don't know everything. I wish I did, but I don't. There are others' perspectives out there. That's these explosions, this uncertainty, right? Other people have different thoughts. And I know this because not everyone in the room is a Seahawks fan, right? Because you have a different perspective, because you've grown up with different experiences, and it shaped your green blocks. While we have the same green block on the stove, we don't have the same green block in football, right? What about your airmen? They have different green blocks too, okay? If we combine these, if we're willing to combine these, then we get a shared perception. And it becomes bigger. So let me give you a real world example of this, right? So I recently moved to Texas from Alabama, right? I was gonna buy a house in New Braunfels, Texas, okay? So my little brain started working, going to my green blocks. And yep, I had a green block on buying houses. I've done that before. How to get a mortgage, right? What I wanted in a house. But I started looking at green blocks, and as hard as I tried, I didn't have a single green block on the real estate market in New Braunfels, Texas. Didn't exist in my brain. Okay, that was somewhere over here. So what could I do? How do I get green blocks on the real estate market in New Braunfels, Texas? What's that? Collaborate. So I could do some research, but more importantly, who has a green block, a bunch of green blocks about the real estate market in New Braunfels, Texas? A realtor, right? So I went out and hired a realtor, and we had a shared perception, and instantly I had green blocks I didn't have before, didn't I? As long as she's on, it happened to be a she, as long as my realtor is on my team and we're working towards the same shared objective, right? Like a professional inside of our profession of arms. Now all of a sudden I got a shared perception. That's how this works. You got to understand that other people have different green blocks, and their green blocks look like uncertainty to you. And it's not comfortable, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. So let me give you one other little thought about how this works and why this works and what's important. I told you that inside of nature, there can't be two deterministic facts that are exactly the same, but are opposite on the same subject, right? Same thing in your brain. You cannot hold two green blocks in your brain that have opposite fact on the same subject. It's not possible. Your brain won't like it. And the alien in your brain will scream and come screaming out your chest, right? Because it doesn't like it. And so you're gonna stick to the green block you already have. Because is it easier to reinforce a green block you already have or replace it with a new one? Reinforce. It's easier to reinforce. So keep that in mind, okay? It's called cognitive dissonance, okay? Not cognitive distance, like I called it for a while until I got embarrassed. Cognitive dissonance. And it says I can't hold two competing facts in my mind at the same time. Okay, they can't be opposite facts. Not that you can't think through and consider different options. I'm talking about something you consider a fact. Either that stove's gonna hurt me or it's not. I can't hold both in my brain. So let's talk then about how this gets used. Let's talk about how we apply this green block in our life. And we're going to talk about systematic thinking, right? This is only one version of thinking. Okay, there's other ways of thinking. There's creative thinking. There's critical thinking. There's other types of thinking. But we're going to talk about systematic thinking. What is systematic thinking? Systematic thinking is going from step A to B, from B to C, from C to D. What's that sound like? Linear, but it sounds like what in our Air Force? Checklist. It sounds like how we do a lot of our business, right? We do it very systematically, right? In fact, there's a picture of our business, right? Right here, right? Who here has ever flown on an airplane? Ever in the career, right? I did this in Hawaii. Some arms didn't go up. I said, either you came on a boat or you're born in Hawaii or you flew on an airplane, right? So you've flown on an airplane. So there's some pilots in the room. Pilots, it's time to land, right? We got to do a couple things. We got to get the gear down, then we got to come in for a landing, right? All of you not in the front, hope the pilot does that in the right order, don't you? Things have to be done in order. In nature, there are certain things that have to be done in order, okay? Right here, right? So this one right here, who hopes that the anesthesiologist right back here went before the oral surgeon, right? The anesthesia, anybody? Anybody? You hope the anesthesiologist went first, right? Chess is the quintessential systematic thinking game. It teaches you to think in time through consequences of actions, right? Who here plays chess? Okay. Who plays chess with their kids? Raise your hands up high if you play chess with your kids. Okay, for the rest of you, start playing chess with your kids, and I'm going to tell you why. Okay? I didn't play chess with my kids till I took this course. The part of your brain, we put people in an MRI, or they put people in an MRI, the part of your brain that walks through consequences of decisions is the same part of your brain that lights up in an MRI when you play chess. Okay? So let me say that again. The part of your brain that's responsible for consequences of decisions is the same part of your brain that is used when you play chess. So play chess with your kids. If you don't know how to play, start with 4 pieces, a king, a queen, and 2 pawns. Or do what I did. I got an iPad, right? So I went online and I downloaded what? A chess app. So I know these crazy way the pieces move, because otherwise I wouldn't know how they moved, right? And I started playing chess with my kids. Now, I made one mistake, and I didn't tell my wife what the goal of playing chess with my kids was, and that's going to come clear here in just a second on this story. So I sat down to play chess with my kids, right? They know nothing about the game. And I know the most powerful piece on the board is the queen, right? Because she can move any direction as far as she wants, right? Everyone else has limitations. The most powerful piece on the board is the queen. So what do? The first couple times I play the kids, I break my queen out, and I rush her across the board and do what? Just lay waste. Game's over that quick, right? Well, they figure out pretty quick, oh, the most powerful piece on the board is the queen, right? So they break their queen out. They rush their queen across the board. They take one of my pieces. What do I immediately do? Take the queen, right? And what do they immediately do? Dad! And then my wife goes, knock it off. She's 8. And I'm like, shh, I'm trying to teach her something. That was a mistake. Whap, right? Okay. What does my child immediately reach for when playing on the iPad? I took her queen. What she immediately reached for? The back button, the undo button, right? And I go, no, this is life. 2 to 3 games. Bring the queen across. Immediately take the queen. No kidding. I saw this physically happen. She goes to move the queen, and she goes, oh. If I do that, Dad's going to take my queen. And I went, yes, because I have just deliberately engineered and exercising her brain on consequences of actions. 8 years old, right? Deliberately engineered. You know where they are now? They go, if I do that, Dad will do that, and I can take his queen. That's where they are now. Now they're thinking about consequences of actions 2 steps ahead. Okay? Now, in my household, we are not expert chess players. That's probably where we'll stop, right? The experts are 8, 12 moves ahead, right? Think about this. My 15-year-old son, I have deliberately exercised this part of his brain. What happens when he gets his license here in May, right? And he's out on a Friday night. If I do this, this is going to happen. Dad's going to kill me. I'm doing it anyway, right? But if I just get him to stop and think about it, how much better of an opportunity have I done at shaping my kids at having successful teenage years instead of traumatic teenage years? Okay? Play chess. Play chess with your kids, because when you play chess with your kids, it exercises the whole, it deliberately engineers, and it's simple to exercise the whole idea of thinking through consequences, right? So look, here's how this works. If I know just a little bit about your green blocks, and I deliberately engineer a systematic process, I can get you to an outcome, an activity, a behavior that I want. I'm going to prove it to you right now, okay? I'm going to prove it to you right now. Now, I'm going to walk you through a little exercise. Math is involved, and math is, see, look, I already trained you, right? So seriously, if you're not good at math, pick a small number, okay? Pick a small number, okay? So here's what I want you to do. Pick a number between 1 and 10. Everyone pick a number between 1 and 10. Okay? Does everyone have a number between 1 and 10? I want you to multiply that number by 9. Multiply your number by 9, okay? If you have a single-digit number, that's your new number. If you have a 2-digit number, so you picked your number, you multiplied it by 9. If you came out with a 2-digit number, I want you to add the 2 digits together. Add the 2 digits together. Does everyone now have a new single-digit number? Does everyone now have a new single-digit number? Okay. I want you now to subtract from that new single-digit number 5. Subtract 5 from that new single-digit number, okay? Does everyone have a new number that they subtracted 5 out? I want you to convert that number to a letter in the alphabet. So I have 3. So A, B, C would be my letter. So get your letter tied to your number. For me, it would be C. A, B, C, D, E, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, okay? Does everybody have a letter? Does everyone have a letter? Okay, I want you to think of a country that starts with that letter. Name of a country that starts with that letter. Okay, does everyone have a country? Everyone have a country? Okay, the last letter in the name of your country. Last letter in the name of the country. I want you to think of an animal that whose name starts with that letter. Take the last letter in the name of the country, think of an animal whose name starts with that letter, okay? Now I want you to think about where in the world that animal predominantly comes from. Okay? Now raise your hand if you have an Australian kangaroo that lives in Denmark. Raise it up high, hold it high. It's usually about 75%, we're pretty close. Raise your hand if you got a Mexican iguana that lives in Djibouti. No? One? Happens in the military, okay? Happens in the military. Why? Who chose Denmark? You did. Who chose a kangaroo? You did. And of course, we know where kangaroos come from, right? Who had a koala that lived in Denmark, okay? Who didn't get a D? Who did not get D for their letter? Don't raise your hand because you're bad at math. Okay. I could have told you, hey, I want you to think about an animal. I want you to think about a kangaroo, an Australian kangaroo that lives in Denmark, and you would have said, yeah, I'm thinking about it, but this is stupid. I don't get it. Why are we doing this? Instead, I walked you through just a small series of events, right? And you chose you chose the number, you chose D, you chose Denmark, you chose kangaroo. How did I get 75% of us there then? Because I understood just a little bit about your green blocks, what's up here, and I deliberately engineered a system to get you to D. That was the trick. And then it was relying on your green blocks. But guess what? Sometimes we don't share the green blocks, do we? I taught this at an ATC commander's course, and they sent a commander down from Shepherd, right? NJEP, anybody here go to NJEP, right? They sent a commander down, and he was from Germany. And when I got him to D, you know what country he came up with? Deutschland. It doesn't work in German. It only works in English. That's one of the green blocks I'm counting on, is English. Sometimes we don't have the same green blocks. And when we lose somebody, right, you're trying to walk somebody, one of your airmen, through this systematic thinking, A to B to C. You go on to D and they stay at C because they don't own a green block for D. And you're on to E and F and you look back and they're no longer there. And you go, God, how could you be so stupid? And you start talking about this again, right? Look, I just need you to do this. Instead, I've lost you here. We gotta shape this. And here, I'll show you how this works, okay? So everybody, stick your hand straight out with your thumbs pointed up in the air. And stick your hand straight out. Rotate it so your thumbs are pointed at each other. Rotate it so your thumbs are pointed down. Now take your right hand, put it over the top of your left hand and clasp. Right hand over the top of the left hand and clasp. There we go. Okay, now straighten out your arms. Why are we different? Because somewhere along the way, your green block step was different than my green block step, right? I cheated. I cheated. I'm not quadruple jointed. Okay? So you got to be careful on this. It's hugely powerful, right? I begin to drop the breadcrumbs. I leave string so that they begin to make their own decisions. I begin to shape the environment. So I change their perception, what's in their best interest to do. They make their own decision to join our in-group, their own decision to modify their behavior, and I get the behavior I want 75 to 80% of the time. What about the other 20 to 25%? Do I just leave them out? No. I got to go back to them, because they have a different green block, and I got to engineer, and I got to understand that they think differently than me. They're missing an experience, and I can begin to deliberately engineer to bring them along as well, okay? This is how we begin to use organic leadership and self-discovery as opposed to mandate leadership. Kangaroo, think about a kangaroo. Okay, I'm thinking about a kangaroo. You're just stupid. Huh? Here's the negative side of our green blocks, right? Our green blocks are important. They're hugely important. They're what helps us make sense of the world around us, right? My green blocks is what allows me to step up to the curb on a road down here on the strip, right? Stop and look left and watch for cars or motorcycles coming, right? And if there's a car coming, I don't go, or a motorcycle. Right? I don't have to stop and think, well, here comes a motorcycle. If I step out there, it's going to hit my left leg. It's going to nearly take my leg off. It's going to spin me around, and my head's going to smash against the concrete, and I'm going to have no leg, and I'm going to be almost dead. Right? I don't have to think that. All I do is go, motorcycle coming, right? That same green block, however, doesn't work very well in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. I was a lieutenant. We took an airplane, or a group for the squadron took an airplane over there, put it into depot level maintenance, right? Engineers downtown. He looks left. There's no cars coming. He steps just like that. A motorcycle hits him doing 80. Just about rips his right leg off. Why? Why didn't his green block work for him there? They drive on the other side of the road. So we got to watch out for our green blocks, because our green blocks often become our own biases. They become personal biases, and they become blind spots. And you're not even aware of them. And you can't see how other people could think that any other team besides the Seahawks is worth cheering for. Because you got a personal bias. Your own green blocks, the very thing you need to make sense of the world around you, begins to cloud how you think, okay? And I'm going to prove this to you. And I'm going to prove to you that you got blind spots. Who in the room thinks they have blind spots? Yeah, we all do. So, and you got to know them, okay? So here's what I want you to do. I want you to stare at the center green dot, okay? So there's going to be a green dot right here in the center. It's going to be blinking. Stare right at that dot right there. What's going on with the yellow dots? They're disappearing. Look at the yellow dots. Are they disappearing, flashing, or blinking? No. Stare at the center green dot. What's going on with the yellow dots? They're blinking. No, look at the yellow dots. Are they blinking, disappearing, or flashing? Okay, stare at the center green dot. What's going on with the yellow dots? They're not blinking. I've proven to you they're not blinking. They're there all the time. Stare at the green dot. What's going on with the yellow dots? Man, I just had all three of them disappear. Were they ever blinking, flashing, or going away? No, but your brain what? Your brain told you they were, didn't they? Why? What's in our Air Force world, what's this right here? What are we always focused on? What is that? That's a mission, right? What's this blue? It's noise, right? It's the Vice Wing Commander, right? Love you, Aaron. It's noise. We'll talk about what the noise looks like here in a minute, but it's noise. And so what did your brain do? It couldn't handle this and the noise, so it started dropping things, right? It started dropping things. Well, what might that be? Might be our airmen, right? All of a sudden, I got to drop my airmen. What might that be? Maybe that's my family, right? I work 70 hours, 80 hours a week. I've dropped my family because I can't handle this and the noise and these green dots. These green dots, or these yellow dots, are important. They're important. Okay? What does your noise look like? Has anybody got noise that looks like this? If as a leader you let your noise level get to the point where you can't see your yellow dots, what happens? Do you get an Airman Jones that we open the day with? Let me give you an example of how, if you manage how to manage your noise level so that you don't drop the yellow dots, right? So General Rand was wing commander at Blod. Anybody over there with him when he was at Blod? Anybody over there? So General Rand was the wing commander at Blod. 2-star, right? And so he's out flying. He flew on a regular basis, right? And of course, maintainers in the room, if the 2-star wing commander's coming down to fly and his airplane's on the line, that day you're going to put him in what airplane? His, right? Because he can go up with his name on one side, the crew chief's name on the other. So he got to know 50% of the time he flew his airplane, he got to know that crew pretty good, right? Not only his crew chief, but the load crew. There's a young man off the load crew that acted as the fire guard for starts on that shift, right? It's a guy named Airman Steven Tyler. No, it's not that Steven Tyler, right? Airman Steven Tyler, right? So Airman Tyler, he got to know Airman Tyler pretty well. So what General Rand would do to bring these yellow dots back into focus, because what'd you have to do to get the yellow dots back? Just look at them, right? But it had to be deliberate, right? It couldn't be, had to be deliberate, right? So what he did to get those yellow dots to come back is he would finish flying. He'd say, hey, Airman Tyler, I got to walk over to the ECP, right? It's about 100 yards away, right? Because if I cut straight across, then every security forces in the world, airman's happy, right? Because he gets to put me face down on the ground, right? So I got to walk over here. So he'd say, walk with me. Airman Tyler, walk with me. And when he started walking with Airman Tyler, what did he ask him? He didn't ask him, how's your AMRAAM loading going? Where are you out on your CDCs? No, he asked him things like, who are you? Where are you from? Why did you join the Air Force? Where do you want to be in 5 years? You know what he found out about Airman Tyler? He found out that Airman Tyler was one of those kids that came from a kind of a rough part of town. Hadn't been a very good kid, but he'd done good enough to join the Air Force. And he had kind of disappointed his mom when he was a younger teen, right? And all Airman Tyler wanted to do was make his mom proud. That's why he joined the Air Force, for his mom. So he got to know Airman Tyler. Well, a couple months later, he's walking back from a flight. He hadn't flown that airplane. He's walking back from a flight, and Airman Tyler comes running over and goes, General Rand, can I walk with you today? And he goes, no, Airman Tyler, I'm almost there. You go back to work. And he goes, no, General Rand, I'd like to walk with you today. Airman Tyler, go back to work. I got it. And he says, sir, I need to talk to you. Can I walk with you today? And the general didn't let the noise filter this yellow dot out. He goes, sure, Airman Tyler, come on. They take about 5 steps, and Airman Tyler says, sir, you probably have realized you're the closest thing I've ever had to a father figure in my life. And the general stops. Because this probably isn't where he thought the conversation after flying was going to go, right? And he turns to Airman Tyler, he says, Airman Tyler, what's going on? He said, well, General, I've got myself in a little bit of trouble with a lady back home in Italy. I don't know what to do. My mom's not going to be very happy. She's not going to be very proud. Can you understand that, right? And I probably need to get out of the Air Force. And General Rand, I've heard him tell this story a dozen times. He's never actually said what his advice was to the airmen, but they have a conversation right there. 2-star general, 2-stripe airman. No millennial issues. No too much noise to allow him to focus. Today's Tech Sergeant Tyler, he's a chaplain's assistant at Lackland. He's married, 2 kids, and we know for a fact that his mom is really proud of him. Why? Because the general, the 2-star, he took time to filter out the noise. Took time to get rid of a little bit of excessive noise and had an opportunity to make sure those yellow dots were taken care of. What about you? How are you dealing with your noise? Let's talk about some other things that your brain and your green blocks do. If you got biases and you got blind spots, then you get misperception. And if we're trying to shape the perception of those around us so that they'll do what they perceive in the best interest to do, if we're misperceiving the world, how well are we going to do at shaping? Now, probably not too good, right? Probably not too good. Okay, so let's talk about this first one, mental entrenchment. Mental entrenchment. We all suffer from mental entrenchment, and we suffer from mental entrenchment on a lot of things, but I'm going to prove it to you right now. What do you guys see here? Anybody? Shout out. What do you see? Spiral. What else? Sorry? Tunnel. What else? Some people say gun barrel. I see concertina wire. I don't know what jail I broke out of. Okay. But what if I told you these were circles? Would you believe me? These are circles. Let me prove it to you. So here we go. We're going to start right here at the bottom, right? Now I'm going to come around. Do not let me jump lines. Do not let me jump lines. And I'm going to end right back at the bottom. Right here. Come around. Don't let me jump lines. I'm going to end right back at the bottom. Just to prove to you it's not just one that I'm faking. And let me come up 1, 2, 3 right here. I'm 3 up. Coming around. Don't let me jump lines. 1, 2, 3. It's right here. Coming up. Coming around. 1, 2, 3. They're circles. Have I proven they're circles? Beyond a shadow of doubt, have I proven they're circles? Who sees circles? Who still sees a spiral or concertina wire or a tunnel? Why? Your brain is filtering the information in the world around you and is mentally entrenched, and it says that's a spiral. What if that's how you see a certain airman or a certain type of person, certain religion, certain gender, certain race, and you're mentally entrenched? Can you see them for what they are, and can you begin to shape their perception, to shape their perception? Or are you misperceiving them, right? If you don't think you're mentally entrenched because it's a silly little, maybe a kind of cool little optical illusion, let me ask you about mental entrenchment here. Everybody cross your arms. Everybody cross your arms. Okay, now reverse your hands. Who's, I can't even do it, right? Who's uncomfortable reversing their hands? Why? Physically, it's no different. Why? It's a mental entrenchment. I'm mentally entrenched with the way my hands should be. It's what I'm used to, right? Remember those green blocks? I've built a lounge chair out of my green blocks, right? I like my green blocks. They're comfortable. We had this discussion, right? Those red explosions, those millennials, their way of thinking, those are not comfortable to me. So I build a wall so I don't even have to see them. Out of my green blocks, and my green blocks start to become biases, blind spots, dogma, right? Right? So let me prove to you a couple other ways you're mentally entrenched. Who has money in their wallet? Who has money in their wallet in order? Who has money in their wallet in order, all facing the same direction? It's not that you're OCD, you're mentally entrenched in what that organization in your wallet should be. One other one. Everybody takes a side on this one, okay? Everyone takes a mental entrenchment side on this one. Are you a toilet paper over the top or a toilet paper under the bottom person? And will you go to a friend's house and change it? You're mentally entrenched. You're mentally entrenched. But by the way, the patent says over the top, so if you're doing it on the internet. Mentally entrenched. If you're mentally entrenched, you cannot perceive the world around you accurately. If you can't perceive the world around you accurately, you can't shape. Okay? Egocentric perspective. What's that say? Egocentric begins to over-exaggerate my role in something, right? This is how the fish was this big, right? This is also how Brian Williams for NBC could begin to start to tell the story where he's in the helicopter that got shot at instead of being present when a helicopter got shot at, right? Did he mean to do that? No, his brain actually physically began to change the memory, because your brain, if you're egocentrically biased, your brain begins to insert yourself more and more and more into the story. I've caught myself on this. I traveled with General Rand through Atlanta. I've never traveled with General Rand through Atlanta. It was my boss, but it's easier to say I was with General Rand, wasn't it? It's not true. But my mind wants to change the story to be my experience. I own the green block. I want it to be my experience. It's not true. That's what egocentric does for you. So if you're egocentric, then you start to make things about you, right? Ethnocentric says what? I see the world through the lens of what I'm surrounded by, right? Which middle circle is bigger? Same. Now everyone says same. Is it A, because you've seen this optical illusion before, or is it B, you're tired of being fooled by the colonel? Okay. Who sees the left circle bigger than the right? Who sees the left circle bigger than? We know they're the same, don't we? We know. We've seen this optical illusion before. We know they're the same. Why does this one look bigger than that one? Because of what it's surrounded by, right? Here's you. Here's your Friday night. Here's your airmen. Here's their Friday night. Do they look the same? Do you think you're surrounded by the same experiences as the airman that you're going to get in 5 months that's about to graduate BMT on Friday? Do you think you got the same experiences? How old was that airman on 9/11? 4 or 5 years old on average. Think about that. The airman you're going to get in 6 months, the brand new airmen that are graduating BMT this Friday, was 4 or 5 on 9/11. They don't remember 9/11. What they remember of 9/11 is what they've seen in documentaries and TV. Right? What does your world look like versus theirs? By the way, you want to know what your teenager is going to look like in 5 years? Look at who they're surrounding themselves with. 5 years, maybe. For my friend Rich, it took 18 months, right? 18 months of surrounding himself by something that wasn't healthy is all it took to destroy him. Okay? And which, when we begin to then view our airmen through our lens, we see them differently, don't we? And we begin to view ourselves as bigger. Who's more important, you or your airmen? You notice I didn't say who has the job of more responsibility. Who's more important as a person? You're the same. Watch out if you're viewing the world. By the way, they don't have the ability to view the world through your lens, because they don't have those experiences. But you have the ability to go back and view it through theirs, because you've seen this parade before, right? You have to be the one to think differently, not your airmen, not your teens. Your teens can't imagine what it's like to have kids. But you can, so you need to go back and you need to shape the world through their lens, okay? Anybody got any of those closed-minded people working in your squadron? How do you like dealing with them, right? What about conceit? You know, Pace is here to teach you all because you can't figure this out yourself, right? That's why we're here. No, how conceited would that be? What a misperception of the world would that be? And if I don't understand your perception, how can I begin to shape your perception to get the behavior I want, right? Let me give you some examples of some biases. The first one is called a confirmation bias, and this is the most common bias, and we all suffer from this, right? This is the part, remember I talked about cognitive dissonance? And your brain can't have two competing green blocks, two competing facts in the brain at the same time, right? So therefore, I'm going to look for information that does what? Confirms or supports what I already believe, and I'm going to ignore the information that challenges it, right? This is how two fans from opposite teams can watch the same instant replay on TV, and one go, that's a catch, and the other go, it's an incomplete pass. It's the same information. Well, I'm looking for the information that supports what I already believe. Okay, confirmation bias. We all suffer from this one. We all suffer strongly from this one, so watch out for it, okay? Anchoring, this is over-reliance on a single piece of information, right? So once I got this one piece of information in my brain, all my decisions come from that, and guess what? It's incomplete data. Okay, so anchoring. Halo effect. We've seen this a lot in the flying world, right? Anybody ever see this in the flying world? This is, we go fly with the old man, and the young captain won't tell the old man that he's screwing it up because of the halo effect, he must be good, right? And next thing you know, they're hitting the mountain, right? Or crashing. Okay? But this applies out of the cockpit as well. And it applies both positively and negatively. If I had a bad experience with a certain type of person, or even with that person on that day, if I only judge them by their actions instead of their intentions and their context, like Maxwell talked about, then I put a halo on them or horns on them, and every time I deal with them, I'm going to treat them like I expect them to act the same way. I got to look at the context of the situation, okay? Groupthink. Groupthink's a really bad one because we think, because we brought a group together, we're fighting biases, right? But if everybody at the table looks like Peyton Manning in that one commercial where he has the bobblehead, you know, he's like, do I really look like this? And the bobblehead's going like that. If that's what your entire staff meeting looks like, if nobody dissents, then you've probably brought together a group that gives you groupthink, right? Okay, you probably need to have somebody that has some different green blocks. If everybody in your council looks the same as you, and I don't mean physically, I mean they're all the same AFSC, they're all about the same age, they're all gone through the same basis, you probably are all going to come to the same conclusion given any context or any problem, and you're going to get groupthink. And groupthink is dangerous because we defeated biases by bringing a group together, and all we did was get a group bias. Okay, so watch out for groupthink. Overconfidence bias. This says that I tend to be more confident in my ability to make decisions and more confident in what I know than I really am. And guess what? The more senior I go up in rank, the more likely overconfidence bias goes up, right? So I suffer from this as a group commander. I was certain. I knew my group. I knew its mission. I knew its strengths and weaknesses. I knew its resources. I knew its people. If my wing commander called me with something he wanted me to do, some project he wanted me to take on, in 5 minutes I could have the solution for my group commander. I was sure of it. I was confident of it. But you know what I found? 100% of the time, if I brought my commanders together and I threw the idea on the table, you know what I got 100% of the time? A better solution. 100% of the time. I was overconfident in my ability. And I knew that, which is why I brought my commanders together. Okay? I knew that. But the question is, and you'd have to ask them, is when I brought them together, did I really bring them together, or was I looking for them to just do number one for me? And I'll confirm what solution I'd already come up with. It took me a little while to make sure I wasn't just doing that. Okay? Watch out for becoming overconfident. Okay? How do we deal with personal biases then? How do we deal with our green blocks? Our green blocks help us make sense of the world around us, but they can become to hinder us. They can start to cause problems. They can begin to defeat trust and be the enemy of trust. How do we deal with personal biases? Rarely seek or expect absolutes. Now, I would write up there, never seek absolutes. Thank you, somebody got it. Rarely seek absolutes. Now, I know what you're thinking. Well, Spoon, there are some things in the world that are absolute, like thou shalt not kill. That's an absolute. Really? What's our mission in the profession of arms? Kill people. Okay, I know an absolute. Our core values an absolute, right? Integrity first. Okay, great. So you and I are flying one day together. We get shot down. I get captured. You're in hiding. Where's your partner? I'm going to go, I'm so sorry. Come on out. Integrity first, right? No, I'm going to lie my ass off. Oh, he stole the truck and went that way. Run, right? So don't seek absolutes. Now, standards are standards. But if you think that no matter what, every time this action happens, this is the result that is going to happen, you probably have an absolute. You probably need to stop and look at the context and think about what else you're missing, okay? Rarely seek absolutes. Challenge your own green blocks. This did say challenge your own beliefs. You got core beliefs that define who you are. That's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about challenge your own green blocks. What experience have I had that have led me to this point in my leadership and these decisions that maybe if I had a different green block, I'd find a better solution? That's what I want you to challenge. Don't just jump to an automatic conclusion. It kind of goes with the one above it, right? Ponder more or talk less. You got two of these, one of these. Right? God gave you 2 ears, one mouth. So ponder just a little bit more and talk a little bit less. Take in a little more of the world around you. You begin to expand your green blocks. You begin to make fight off bias, okay? Ask yourself, what am I missing? What am I missing? That means you have to acknowledge you might be missing something, right? Ask yourself, what am I missing? You want to fight off bias, you need to understand what you don't know, okay? And that goes to the next one, try assuming you're wrong. We're going to talk about the vulnerability fallacy and the communication block next, okay? And what the vulnerability fallacy is and what it means. But it's the idea of try assuming you're wrong. Start with if you know that person you constantly fight with? Mine's called a wife, right? No, it's not. Boy, you guys, you know that person at work you constantly argue with, you constantly butt head with? How bad would you flip that entire thing on its head if next time you went into that argument assuming you were wrong to begin with? How bad would it flip the entire conversation on its head, right? Seek alternatives from others. If you only seek alternatives from yourself, all you're going to do is go to the same green blocks you already went to. You're going to get the same solution, right? And if your others look exactly like you, then you're just going to get groupthink, right? Why do we want diversity in our Air Force? Is it so our pictures look prettier? No, we don't need physical diversity, okay? But physical diversity brings diversity of green blocks in thought. As hard as I try, I cannot understand what it means to be a single enlisted woman in the Air Force today. I can't do that. I will never own that green block. Even our female leaders in the room, they can't understand what it means to be female at 18 in the Air Force today. They can't own that green block. You can't understand what it means to be a minority in 18 in the Air Force today, even if you are. Okay? This is why we need to have others around us. It's not as much that they look different than us, but when they look different, they tend to bring different perspectives. Okay? If my group is made up of middle-aged white guys that grew up in Seattle that flew A-10s, I'm probably going to get groupthink. Probably going to get groupthink. Okay? I need to have a group that looks different, at least in the ideas, in the generation of the ideas and where they came from. That's why we want diversity. Okay? Not because we want to look different in pictures, but because diversity, physical diversity, often brings with it diversity of thought, and diversity of experience, and diversity of green blocks. Okay? Turn off some noise. If you find yourself dealing with biases and blind spots, turn off some noise. Whatever that noise is, find somebody that can handle the noise. Here's the thing. We're going to have times when we can handle a bunch of noise, and then times when we can't. Right? So part of one of the experiences that I got to experience as a group commander was an IG complaint filed against me, right? Eventually proven unsubstantiated. But as soon as the IG got off the phone, where was my next phone call that I made? To the ADC. Never talked to an ADC in my life except to tell them that I thought they were misrepresenting one of my people, right? So I could tack my person to the wall. All of a sudden I had a lawyer. I never had a lawyer before. What happened to my noise? Through the roof. What did I need? I needed a deputy and I needed a superintendent that could pick up some of those things for me, right? Anybody ever hear you should do only the things you can do? Anybody ever hear that? I'm not a big fan of that statement because if as the guy sitting in the front row, as colonel leaders, if you should do only the things that only you could do, you'd never get to know an airman, right? Because you got subordinate commanders to get to know an airman. I think it's important we all get to know our airmen. But you should do first only those things you can do. And then with your excess bandwidth, you can go on and take on other things. And sometimes I'll have a whole bunch of bandwidth, and other times I might have none. And that's when I need to get rid of a little bit of noise. And that's what I need a good deputy for, right? If you're a commander, you need a good DO, you need a good chief, you need a good shirt, right? The wing commander needs a good vice. Give a little bit of that noise. Okay? This is how we get around biases, folks. All right, it's 12:30. Let's take 10 minutes.